right. Excuse me. All right, good morning. I was very encouraged last night watching. There was a YouTube channel that I was watching yesterday that I discovered. It was on my suggested YouTube channel, and I was just so impressed. It was just talking about very similar things that I'm interested in talking about, and I just found it very interesting and fascinating. I found the reactions that people had to it fascinating as well, to be honest. And I don't remember the name of the channel now, but he made one video just giving encouragement to people who want to make their own YouTube channels. And I've been doing this for years, and this fellow seems to have thousands of subscribers, I mean, I always ask my wife, I said, how is it that some of these folks, they are so successful on YouTube? And they're like, oh, they're all pretty young girls. That's what my wife said, and I was like, well, this guy, I mean, he's a handsome young man, but still, I don't think that's why people are watching him, and I'm not sure what it is that he has I don't have, or maybe he's been doing it for a while, and, I don't know how much he's making. He doesn't have millions of subscribers, but he has, I don't know, over 100,000 subscribers. Each video has, about at least 5,000 views, something like that. So you have a video with 5,000 views, that's $5, You make a video like that every day, you can make a few $100s a month, That's also not bad. Help pay some bills, something like that. And then also, like, this other video I saw, they were talking about, that you can make money on, what's it called? Not just the advertising from Google, but you can have product placement, or you can have, you can sell your t-shirts and things like that. I have books for sale. So, we'll see how things go. So anyway, this is not what I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about today, I think I've spoken about it before, but it's always worthwhile to review some of these ideas as well. I have, different sets of friends and mentors and rabbeim and so forth. In general, just coincidentally, I would say, those that I would consider to be rabbeim mentors, even if I've only met them in person once or twice, but either I read their writings, and sometimes one in particular I correspond with more than the other, but mostly I learn from them online. Two rabbis in particular I can think of on one hand, and on the other hand, some friends of mine, peers of mine more than mentors, but people who I love and respect very much. All of them, they have between them a common denominator, but aside from them, uncommon denominators. And generally they fit into one or two of these groups. This is a very parochial Jewish discussion, as many of my discussions are, and but it's one that's garnered a lot of discussion. And so what I'm talking about here is the question between rationalism and Kabbalah, mysticism. It's interesting. A few days ago I attended a meeting with the New York Board of Rabbis, which I know a lot of the, especially the Litvisher Rabbanim, are very against the New York Board of Rabbis. But the thing is, I learned about the New York Board of Rabbis from Williamsburg Yidden, from Chassidish, Sapper Yidden. That's where I picked up, the idea that I should join and so forth. But I felt it's important to network And the thing is, it opened my eyes to things that, well, first of all, in my rabbinical career, this has been the norm for me. I mean, in particular, when I lived in Richmond, I would always go to interfaith meetings and interdenominational meetings, which the other Orthodox rabbis generally did not. I never saw another Orthodox rabbi at an interfaith meeting, and once or twice I saw other Orthodox rabbis at the interdenominational Jewish meetings, either of the rabbis or the educators. And I just love to go to these meetings. I just So anyway, I don't really have time to go schlep into Manhattan to do these things, and particularly I had to miss some work, and I had to spend a lot of money that I couldn't really afford. I could afford, but not really. In the long run, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. At the time, maybe yes, but Yontif is coming up. All kinds of things I have to think about. And here I have to spend, $52 to park, plus the program I went to, plus, whatever. It's neither here nor there. It's not what to talk about. It's not much, you can't cry over spilt milk. And now I'm on my way back to Manhattan again, and again missing work, but this is for a job interview. But here I was at this meeting. All different types of rabbis, Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, I don't know, maybe Reconstructionists, but probably about 30, 40 rabbis there. There were 5 speakers. I missed the first 3. I was only there for the last 2. And the one just before was Benjamin Blech, who I would have liked to hear. I sat next to him when I did arrive. And I'm very fascinated by all of his things about the Vatican and meeting with the Pope and things like that. But then I heard Rabbi Naomi Levy, who grew up from and went on her own way. I'm not sure which denomination she's from. I would assume conservative, but I really don't know. Who said very interesting things. And then Rabbi Avi Weiss, was very well known, very controversial, of course. I remember just going to one of these interdenominational meetings of the rabbis in Richmond, and the conservative rabbi, who's a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, he said, and a Talmud Chacham a little bit, he said, people say that Avi Weiss is liberal, but nothing he's doing is really liberal. And Rabbi Weiss actually was saying, how in Israel he's still from the Israeli right, but he had a falling out with Meir Kahana and all these different stories and things. All right. He's quite a colorful character. He's a very interesting, different type of fellow. So, and I'm hard to get, come with whatever you want to say. But, he was presenting discussions about tshuva and things, and he brought from all the different schools, from the rationalists, from the mystics, from this, from that. He had his own vocabulary, words like soul print and like fingerprint and things like that. And it was quite nice, to be honest. So anyway, why am I inspired to talk? But here you have a man who's quite clearly mystically inclined, and yet he is comfortable enough to quote from all the different sources, and that's how it's supposed to be. That's how it's supposed to be. That's how it really always was. All the great mystics knew the Rambam. That's just the truth. And then there are those who claim the Rambam himself was a mystic, which could be argued both ways. Most people who really understand the Rambam would disagree to a certain extent, would agree to a certain extent. The question of whether or not he had the Zohar, most likely, if we want to be intellectually honest, he almost certainly did not. However, we can create a mythological Rambam who also exists in a certain realm. This mythological Rambam, this mythological character of Maimonides, who might not be the real Maimonides, and some people might be upset about that. But there is a truth to these mythological figures that we have created over the years out of real historical figures, and so. We talked a few days ago, I think, about the story with in The Simpsons with Jedediah Springfield, and how he how he was really this horrible scoundrel, and yet Lisa Simpson was going to expose who he was, but she realized that people needed their heroes, and most of our real heroes were really great men, and I'm talking the secular heroes as well: Washington, Lincoln, Jefferson, Franklin. They were all great men. They were flawed, and our tzaddikim were much greater than them in their personal lives, for sure. And their accomplishments, though, what they accomplished was, in a way, an actualization of what Torah is all about in reality. But that's not what I want to talk about right now. But the reason I'm saying that is that, indeed, there is this truth of having a mythological character based on an actual historical figure, and how to balance that. And even if for the most part, particularly our tzaddikim, our Gedolei Yisrael throughout the ages, were indeed men of tremendous stature, personally, privately, spiritually, with tremendous integrity, that's unparalleled. And you couldn't compare it to people like Franklin or Jefferson or Marcus Aurelius, who were men of great stature and who accomplished great things. Perhaps their accomplishments in this world were greater than the accomplishments of our tzaddikim. It's possible to say that. It's most likely true to a certain extent. Although the Rambam is, of course, someone who's unique, how he's respected outside of our circles as well. But I want to get to really what I really want to talk about. And one of these rabbis, the two who I started talking about, he writes a series of writings, brilliant writings. He's a very talented writer. He should really publish his writings. Just take what he has already and publish them on Amazon, and that's it. So, but whatever, he has his reasons why he doesn't want to do that. But he does. They are on on the blog that you can read. That's open. Some of them, not everything. Certain things are, and certain things are not. And then he has a private Facebook account where it's something where he has more things that are not for public consumption. But in any event, I'm thinking of this one rabbi and another rabbi, both of which were great mystics, and then compare them to friends of mine, peers of mine, who many of my friends have disowned because of their views, who sharply disagree vis-a-vis these questions of rationalism versus mysticism. And yet, fascinating thing is that in their approach to practical halacha, both of these rabbis, who are great mystics and who understand mysticism in an incredibly deep way, both of them have conclusions in halacha that are more similar to my rationalist friends. And they tend to be much more liberal in their approaches to halacha on both sides. So what is really the meaning of this? And also, based on this, why can't these two groups find common ground to live together? And the fact is, both of these rabbis have lamented the fact that people on these other side are so close-minded on the rationalist side. Not only, but it's interesting, not only in halachic terms, but also in hashkafic terms, in philosophical terms, they tend to be in agreement. The question of, should things be taken literally? And that's the crux of this discussion. Because I'll tell you, friends of mine, they say, look at all the problems in the Jewish world, and they'll blame it on one thing, the Zohar, or they'll blame it on mysticism, they'll blame it on all of these issues. And yet, these two very mystical rabbis who I know probably understand mysticism better than most people who I can think of. Come to the same conclusions. So which is it? What are we talking about? What's really going on here? And so this is the answer. Meaning, of course, there are major problems with groups like Chabad in particular, and a few others that insist on taking every medrash and every Kabbalistic thing literally, and every stringency as almost universally binding, meaning and how they particularly interpret something as a halachically binding thing. And I had that problem myself. I took a lot, in my younger years, even though I was never a Lubavitcher Chassid, I never had the Havamina to be a Lubavitcher Chassid. But often, you would hear something like, the Tzemach Tzedek, Zechus Yigalenu, a big tzaddik and a big posek and a very choshev Gadol b'Yisrael. Nobody disagrees with that. So he mentioned his opinion that to trim your beard is an isser of what we have in this week's Sedra of Leisil B'Shimlas Isha. That it's, and this was an ideology that seemed to be prevalent in Eastern Europe, that a man who didn't have a beard, you might think that maybe he's a woman in drag, like you see this in some of these secular Yiddish, short stories. I don't know, by a singer or Agna. I don't remember. When I was young, I remember reading some of these secular Yiddish stories, which I should have never really read. They were quite disgusting, to be honest. And I think it was Singer. Oh, what kind of smell is that from that truck? Let's get far away from that. So, let's get rid of this. I don't know. So anyway, one of those books I remember, it said something like there was a man who was a maskil, he came to visit the shtetl, and they said, oh, maybe he was a woman disguised as a man because he had no beard, And perhaps, certain things like that, when it comes to particularly these questions of Derech Isha And other issues in halacha often depend on the culture in which you live. Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings that for a man to look in a mirror is a shaila of simlas isha, of derech isha, that it's considered that only women look in mirrors and men don't look in mirrors. However, it mentions that if that's in these lands, in Hungary in those days, but in other countries, it's not considered like that. And I remember there was one bacher who he grew up in either modern Orthodox or yeshivish background, and he became a ganze square chassid. And then later he just dropped Yiddishkeit altogether, as far as I know. It was he bit off more than he could chew. Tfasta meruba like tfasta. He came from a very choshev family. He had his last name was a rabbinical name in Lithuanian circles. I really don't remember offhand his name right now, and it's better I don't. Maybe he's back in Yiddishkeit now. I don't know. I'm talking about stories I remember from 15 years ago. But this bacher, I remember when he was a Heises Vera Chassid, he said, gehört a Yingel gesagt, a Yingel torisch kicken in a Spiegel. He heard one little boy say to another boy, a boy can't look in a mirror. It's not for him. So then he said, kal v'chomer for me. And what I was going to say to him at the time, and what I probably should have said to him, is, I said, it's not kal v'chomer to you. Kal v'chomer means like a priority, all the more so argument, meaning if this is the case with A, so all the more so with B. So his kal v'chomer, his all the more so argument was, if a little boy who's 5 years old or 7 years old or 10 years old says a Yingel kiknish in the Spiegel and a boy doesn't look in the mirror, she said all the more so me, whatever, 19, 20 years old, 22 years old, whatever age he was, and so he said all the more so he is as an adult, and the bacher shouldn't look in the mirror. And so wherever in the apartment that he was staying in, he covered up the mirror. And my gut feeling to say to him at the time, and what I should have said to him, and I didn't, was, wait a second. It's not a kal v'chomer because these boys grew up like this and you didn't. So you're the kal and they're the chomer, and you got to remember that. You're the light and they're the heavy. Not they're the light, you're the heavy. And maybe if he would have realized that, he would still be frum, or maybe he's frum now. I don't know. I have no idea. It's none of my business. But the point was that this is a story to demonstrate this, and people take every little thing as a big thing. They make mountains out of molehills that shouldn't be. This happens in the secular world too. So, we had a case recently that I was dealing with, and I had to speak at a memorial service for someone not Jewish, but someone who I knew, and he was struggling with personal issues, and I really want to make a separate video about this, but I'm nervous it's going to be too controversial. Although on the other hand, maybe that's what gets the views, I don't know. But he was struggling with personal demons, and that wound up, getting him into a fight, and then he hit someone, they hit him back, and he passed away from this attack, from this fight. And someone who I knew, someone who attended groups that I facilitated, someone who I administered to, and I always try, and a major issue of what had happened to him was connected to these questions that he had about his own identity. And people are so obsessed with identity of belonging to a group, whether it's racial, whether it's religious, whether it's a sexual identity, and sometimes they also feel pulled to a particular group, maybe that's not for them, and this and that. And the real message I think we have to bring out of all of this, which goes back to what Rabbi Avi Weiss was saying about the soul print, is that we are all individuals, and we don't belong to any group that's bigger than ourselves. We have associations with groups, but the group is not us. I think that's an important thing to remember. But let's move away from that. And the thing is, I know many people will say that their religious group, including Judaism, certainly has this idea within it that no, the group is us. Whether the Jewish people, and the understanding of Adam Atem, that every Jew is really just like another part of one big body, and how that's similar to how Christians speak of the community of Christianity, as they'll call in their parlance the body of Christ, or how Muslims speak of the Ummah. But still, Afal Piche, despite that, we are still all individuals. Meaning, yes, we are part of a larger composite, and but it's more or less an association. When you speak of different human beings, it could be a very tight association, but an association nonetheless. It's really dangerous for anybody to totally give their heart and soul to any type of group, whether it's religious, political, anything we mentioned before, all of these things, and this obsession with that you have to identify with a group is dangerous. And I feel in this case that we were dealing with before, it cost this man his life. And that's a tremendous tragedy, and perhaps a legacy he could leave is how we can deal with these things. And really, I should make a separate video to discuss this. And the tragedy of what took place because of abuse, and because of the culture's mentality and obsession with labels. Lubavitcher Rebbe always said labels are for shirts, not for Jews, and I would apply that to every human being. We don't, you can have a bunch of identical shirts, but like Rabbi Weiss pointed out in the lecture I went to, Mishnah and Sanhedrin, that says, when a human being makes coins, we use one die to cast the coins, and they're all identical. But when we mint the coins, when God minted us all from Adam, and yet each human being is unique, and it's not just that we have different faces. Our nose is a slightly different shape or something like that, or we have different color hair and things like that. It's more than that. It's that we each have, and that we have just like we have fingerprints, like Rabbi Weiss said, we have soul prints. And we have our own personal struggles and our own personal peckle and all these things, our own little package of troubles and joys and happiness and sadness that each individual has to deal with. Now, that being said, I want to get back to this question of mysticism versus rationalism. And as I mentioned before, but it's worthwhile to repeat again, the major issue is literalism and fundamentalism on either side. Meaning, if we can be open-minded enough to accept the fact that there are different approaches, different types of people, everyone has their own way, we're not going to get distracted and bogged down into these niches that we feel that are so necessary and really are not. And in this way, really, we can find common ground, but also find common respect to the fact that we are all different. And we don't have to fit into any box. We can be individuals, and we can respect and love each other even when we disagree. And so, just because this one believes in the Zohar and this one doesn't mean they can't be the best of friends. Again, I'll mention Lubavitcher Rebbe. And again, I'm not a Lubavitcher Chassid, but Lubavitcher Rebbe learned how to be friends both with Rav Kappa, who denied Kabbalah all the time. And how is it that these two? And the thing is, as much as people want to say Shluchei Shel Adam K'Boisai, it's still a Chafadimian, meaning just because they're K'Boisai doesn't mean they are Oisai. The Lubavitcher Rebbe's Hasidim are not the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And I'm not a blind chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and I have issues with certain things he taught, but for the most part, the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself was much better than his Hasidim. Now, his Hasidim are great people, and there are people who are in many ways on a different and in certain aspects a higher caliber than other people. One Lubavitcher Chassid said to me that there was a huge group of Lubavitcher Hasidim at a Farbrengen, thousands of people, and the Rebbe said, "Wer wilt Ashiris?" Who wants to be wealthy? Who wants to be rich? And only 3 people out of thousands raised their hand, and all of them became extremely wealthy. But the miracle of that story was not that those 3 people raised their hand became wealthy, but how many people there did not raise, how all the other people didn't raise their hand. And the person who told me this is an extremely wealthy person, and he said if he would have been there, he would have raised both hands. So there is a caliber that the Lubavitcher Hasidim have that's a tremendous chashivus, and I have tremendous respect for. My main issue with Chabad is not that they are them, as much as they want everyone else to be like them. And I'm not all Lubavitcher Hasidim believe that, but there is a certain idea that they're self-aware of their superiority, perhaps as well. Meaning, there is a quote, I'm not sure if it's true, that apparently the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that the difference between a Lubavitcher Chassid and any other Jew is the difference between a human being and an animal. I'm not going to say the rest of that, but they'll just say it's a mystery, we have to accept. And I can say no, it's either a guzma, it's quite possible that he said this in an exaggerated way, just like we spoke about how Rav J.B. Soloveitchik, said, he would be Misakana bracha shasani mizrachi, that Rabbi Fishbane Zilgazin told me that, the one time that he ever heard Rav Soloveitchik speak. All right. So the thing is, we have to learn to get along. But my feeling is the mistake that Lubavitch makes. Not all Lubavitchers make this mistake, but in general, they take everything extremely literally, which I don't think Lubavitcher Rebbe himself took things as literally as the people who listened to him did. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, I don't know, but either way, I won't say it's wrong, it's not heretical to take Midrashim literally, but it turns a lot of people off, that's for sure, and it's also not necessarily so. There are different approaches. Some feel like this and some feel like that. And we really should be embracing both sides warmly and respectfully, and not taking sides. Because it's not for us to make those decisions. It's not for really anyone in this generation to make those decisions. Even the Gedolei Yisrael, really, most of the Gedolei Yisrael that I know, accept that there are different views, and their hadracha is in general for their own community, to explain their own community standards, and that's really what the job of Rabbanim are in this day and age, meaning they can guide the standards for their own community, halachically, hashkafically, and so forth. But the thing is, really, in America, you don't have these type of communities anymore, because every place tends to be eclectic. There are very few communities that are uniform in the way that they were in Europe. The Hasidic communities are like that. To a certain extent, many of the Sephardic communities are like that, and the German community, the Gruyers, the Yekas, are like that. But for the most part, the average shul you'll find in Brooklyn, or in Long Island, or in Queens, even if that particular shul has a Rav who wears it on his sleeve that he has a certain approach, the Rav has to be cognizant and aware that his community is eclectic, that he has within his shul Sephardim and Ashkenazim, Hasidim and Litvakas and Yekas, modern Orthodox and Haredim, Frum and non-Frum, and he has to deal with each person Asher Hu Sham. Like I tell the story with Reb Chaim, they call him Reb Chaim from Yerushalayim, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, what was his name? Reb Chaim Daskel. Reb Chaim Daskel, the nephew was this Glenna Rebbe Shlita. And Reb Chaim Daskel, again I'm going to mention Lubavitcher Rebbe, I don't know what is this with Lubavitcher Rebbe today, and if anything it's maybe to teach Lubavitcher Hasidim that not every, that this, the truth is, the book that the Liashna Rav wrote, the Larger Than Life, is very true. That that there has been a historical revisionism created around the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Reb Chaim Daskel, Reb Chaim from Yerushalayim, a big tzaddik, used to make a tish in the old city Yerushalayim, be Mekarev Yidden, and very loving person. He passed away tragically at a young age, and like I said, he was his Glenna Rebbe's nephew. And he said he went to Lubavitcher Rebbe to ask for bracha that he should do kiruv. And Lubavitcher Rebbe said, no, we don't do kiruv. We just make friends. We just fulfill the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael, because how do we know who's far and who's close? Who are we to judge something like that? And it's like I spoke about the other day, meaning if I look at the integrity of my Zayda, of all of my grandparents, of both of my parents, and how much higher their integrity is than my integrity, and just because in some outwardly religious way I might, practice certain practices of piety. So what? That's meaningless in comparison to true integrity of the spirit and who you really are. And that's what I think Lubavitcher Rebbe meant when he said who was close and who was far. And so to all of my friends who disowned other friends of ours because of their beliefs, on either side, don't do that. You gotta love each other. First of all, it's particularly in one particular town in Nassau County, and you know who I mean, very special place that was a very fine Jewish community, particularly the Sephardic community there. God bless you. Please be friends, love each other. Stop fighting over these different things. Alright, God bless you. Please like, share, and subscribe. I gotta check the GPS now. Comment, like, share, and subscribe. Let's learn to agree to disagree and love each other, okay? And that's supposed to have a Thank you so much, everybody.